We're brought together by clouds and streams, for even networks know the strength of connectivity, as we do the power of human connection. Africans, our imagination ruled the world. By it, worlds advanced. New methods demand new forms, so we morphed. From mud huts to skyscrapers, from Morse code to binary code, where coding for girls is not sacrilegious, but said with the same simplicity as a makeup tutorial. Yes, a tomorrow where girls are lining coding like lining makeup, hacking bro codes, breaking barriers. Background has never birthed intelligence and talent, nor be they the DNA of privilege. If you can dream it, you can code it. Debug and refactor with every binary, not restricted by a mouse, keyboard, or data. Be it in a leafy suburb, downtown CBD, or the township. Creativity your currency, your mind a mine. With evolution, the tune never changes. We just dance to it differently. Memory is stored in feeling. This flow is innate. There is no mathematics to the sound. But we have always known this. Rhythm is more in action than in thought, in its playing out than its scripting. Some have called it mysticism. I call it the resurrection of our ancestors who art in heaven through our images of unborn things, our words, sensations, song and dance, an embrace of Urban Festival 2020, an embodiment of the ideal.
Welcome everyone to my IUDF 3. And just listening to the poetry, one thing I ask myself is, in this complex and changing world, how do we really empower and activate people to consciously participate in the transformation of South African cities and towns? What are the big opportunities really if people and places are empowered by technology to achieve our objective of inclusive, resilient, safer and livable cities and towns? And how can an all of society approach to activate citizens and make sure that tech remains accessible to many South Africans? Introducing this year's Urban Festival theme, empowering the civic and exploring it, we are saying that an exploration into how the physical and virtual world can be harnessed and how can we engage people, and reimagining and shaping our cities, both in the strange and uncertain COVID-19 pandemic times and into the future. With that, I would like to welcome everybody to today's session, which we have titled My IUDF Part 3, where we are discussing government as a partner. It really is an opportunity for us today to hear from communities and civil society organizations on their experience of partnering with government. The theme itself is empowered. The theme itself is framed empowering the civic. And so we are going to be unpacking those discussions and hearing from different community agents that are partnering with government in making a difference and making things happen. And before we enter into that, I'd like to also just inform everybody that this session will be recorded today. And if you would like, towards the open question and answer session, to ask a question, please do use the chat for you to be able to do that. And if you would like to vocalize, which is something we would also really like to engage and hear some of the questions and comments you have, please feel comfortable towards the end of this session when we open up for Q&A to raise your hand, and our technical support team will be able to bring you onto the platform, and you will be able to voice your questions or your comments. Thank you so much for making the time today to be with us. And I myself am excited and really looking forward to hear the different stories from the different people on our panel. and I will be introducing them later. But I suppose if you're joining, curious about is, what is the IUDF and why should you be interested? And this is something that we feel every single person and all of civic society should be able to understand, so that we really do support this policy in terms of building up cities that function for the citizens that live in them. So I would like, for the benefit of those who may not know what IUDF is, and also those who do know it, they might have a new insight and a different understanding. I would like for Sean to play a video that will explain to us what the IUDF is. And we'll also go into an element of understanding Lever 7 of how we empower the community. Sean, if you would please play the My IUDF video for us. Thank you.
Meet the Mazibugos, a family living in the township of Soweto in the city of Johannesburg. Grandma Sophie, daughter Nkinzani, and son Sipho live with mom and dad. Nkinzani and Sipho are both university students. Grandma, Gogo Sophie, is retired, while Mr. and Mrs. Mazibugo work in Sandton. At dinner time, the conversation centers on the fact that Gogo Sophie had a very long and tiring day. She had to go to the post office on the other side of town to collect her pension. Because she missed the 6 a.m. bus, Gogo had to wait a whole 2 hours for the next one in the cold. Gogo Sophie prefers the bus to the minibus taxi because it drops her close to the post office and because it's more affordable. Her grandson doesn't understand the reason for this long delay and suggests Gogo try a new way of using public transport. Sipho tells her that she could have taken the Bus Rapid Transit System, or BRT, a new transport system designed to ensure that all who live in the cities and townships can have easy access to the services they need. The BRT is affordable and is made for everyone, young, old, and disabled. This new public transport system is an important part of the national urban policy called the Integrated Urban Development Framework, or the IUDF. Adopted by the South African government in 2016, the IUDF provides a new approach to urban investment, which in turn guides the private sector and households. Its vision is livable, safe, resource-efficient cities and towns that are socially integrated, economically inclusive, and globally competitive, where residents actively participate in urban life. Mr. Mazibugo adds that the IUDF aims to guide the development of cities to be well connected, in which everyone can live and move with ease, while addressing the unique conditions and challenges facing South Africa's cities and towns. Transport systems like the BRT are actually part of rectifying the old geographical patterns created under apartheid, which forced poor, mostly black people to live in areas far from the cities and far from work and recreation opportunities. For example, many people live in Soweto but work in Sandton. This means they have to use a large part of their income and spend hours every day just on transport to work. But a reliable public transport system like the BRT shows that city governments are trying to improve their lives. Nkinzani agrees that this is an important policy, but she has a different set of goals. Her main concern is whether she will get a job after university graduation. Unemployment among young people is really high. Her second concern is security. As a young woman, safety is a big issue. Her mother explains that the IUDF recognizes that cities and towns are at the center of driving sustainable urban development, creating an environment which is conducive to live, work, and play. There are many programs that each municipality is running to ensure that communities are safe, especially for women and children, like the creation of parks. These parks are not only meant to make cities beautiful, which is important, but also to allow safe spaces for people to play and relax in. Mr. Mazibugo mentions that it is also important for citizens to engage with cities, to learn about their programs, and to attend public participation meetings in order to hold cities accountable on their promises. Certain programs, like those focused on equipping and empowering youth to contribute to the city's economy and overall future of our country, run all year round. Some programs are aimed at integrating transport and mobility for people like Gogo, while others serve to create safe recreation areas or to build office and residential infrastructure. The IUDF vision for South Africa's urban areas recognizes that the country has different types of cities and towns, which have different roles and requirements. As such, the vision has to be interpreted and pursued in differentiated and locally relevant ways. Gogo, who has been listening all this time, laughs and says, "Okay, all of you with all these big words, my head is hurting. Make me some tea now. And Sipho, please get me a BRT ticket. I'm not waiting this long again next month." Lever 7. Empowered active communities. Cities cannot succeed without the energy and investment of its citizens. The very power of cities stems from their unique capacity to bring people of diverse social and cultural backgrounds together. Empowered and active communities enable cities to succeed and transform the quality of urban life and result in socially integrated, stable, safe and just societies where all human rights are protected and each individual's dignity is respected.
The IUDF, as you would have heard from the video and the explanation of what Lever 7 is, really is trying to call for all of society to participate in developing cities and towns that are useful for the citizens that live in them. And today, the objective really is to unpack the relationship between communities and government and how that is working. And as one of the speakers today that we have is Benny Dolly. And Benny is a big believer in viewing communities as an asset. And with that, it fuels the work she does and all the activities that she undertakes. Benny is the founding director of Ikala Trust, which was initiated in 2002. And she has more than 30 years experience actually in the not-for-profit sector, and she has held various positions in the space. She's also fortunately participated in leadership programs and leadership courses along the way. And the most notable one is where she participated on New School for Social Research in New York. And in fact, over the years, she has been able to go back as a senior fellow for the program. She travels extensively and internationally, sharing her practice and her experience. And she definitely is a passionate advocate for asset-based community-driven development. And with the lens that says that communities can be assets, she believes that this approach, if it was adopted across all spheres of government, civil society, corporate, and the like, that we would definitely have a country that's not in such a mess today. And I would really like to invite Benny to the floor and to have her share her experience, share with us the value of this lens that she uses of community-driven development, where you have asset-based communities, and to just take us through that journey and how partnering with government, which is what we want to unpack today, has been. Benny, welcome to today's session, and thank you so much for making the time to share your experience and to bring us into an understanding of how we can build communities and hopefully take ourselves out of the mess that we're in today, as you put it.
Thanks so much again for the invitation to just share my own perspectives. So as you rightly said, my name is Bernie Dolly from eColour Trust, sitting in a beautiful sunny Port Elizabeth. I don't know if people can see the mural behind me, but this is the Eastern Cape, is the Addo Elephant Park, which is obviously, elephants are my favorite thing, purely because I think they're just so gentle and so beautiful, and they leave. And so it's part of our signature as well, is to use the elephant footprint wherever we work, because once you have an elephant footprint, it's meant to stay. I was thinking about this conversation a lot after Jeff approached me. And so you could see from my experience that I'm no longer young, but my spirit is very young. So people always ask me, and we say, can't be that your sons are the age that they are. But I think it's my energy and my passion for the work that I do when I see communities driving their own development and using the little bit of resources that they do have to bring about change to their own lives. I remember having a conversation about government as partners almost 25 years ago. And so I wondered, what has shifted? And in my view, nothing has shifted, because the conversation we're having today was held by different people more than 25 years ago. And so we seem to be stuck in time. And I think different angles, different approaches, but we're not cracking the nut. And so mine's both going to be contradictory, but also where I think it's necessary, I will share that experience. So I have great friends, both in the political sphere and people who work in government and at local government level and at different levels. And they are amazing, incredible people who are passionate about communities driving their own development. Unfortunately, they are tiny, tiny minority in the bigger sea. And so often I'm their sounding board for their frustration and anger at why things do not happen. And I think for as long as we view communities, particularly communities that are perceived as materially poor, as long as we perceive them as recipients and beneficiaries and consumers of services, we are never going to fix things in this country. So that gets me to what asset-based community-driven development is, and there's a lot of critique around the approach. But in communities that we are working in and where we have experience and we're currently working with, where people have adopted this approach and internalized it. And so not far from PE, there's an instance happening now where the communities actually said, we are not waiting for government to come and fix the potholes, to come and put bins down in the street, to come and put cages around our trees, because guess what? We have skills, we have gifts, we have talents, and we're just going to get moving, and we're going to do it. We don't need a policy to tell us to do that. It's our right. We want our town to look beautiful, and we want tourists to come and visit. And if we don't take the initiative and we don't step up, then the local community is going to suffer, because the backbone of our community is tourism. So my experience has not been a good one with government, with local government in particular. And I don't know if there's anybody from the Nelson Mandela municipality here, but I am sad at the condition of our city. I am sad that we have slipped this beautiful, beautiful city with its amazing natural resources to be enjoyed by all, has slipped so poorly that it's an embarrassment to tourism. And it shouldn't be like that. So what's the issue? Is it about arrogance? Is it about incompetence? Is it about, what is it about? I don't know. And these are the very same things we were talking about 25 years ago. Is it that we mix in politics with people who actually have to do the work? And maybe we must name the beast, perhaps too much political interference in the work of people who should be doing what they do to build cities from the inside out. And so if you speak to people in Port Elizabeth right now, they'll say, we feel sad. We feel sad that our city has actually decayed in the way that it has. So we try. In my own neighborhood, we've tried. We clean the mess, we cut the grass, we look after the trees, but we're doing it as a group of neighborhood friends. And maybe that's the answer, is to build neighborhoods where people unite, and neighborhoods, not just for safety and security, but neighborhoods that come together to fix some of these and invite officials or whoever in to partnership. And I think we need to be very careful around the word partnership. And I'm going to stop after this comment. Partnership is equal as far as I'm concerned. When I say that I partner with you, we each contribute something of equal value. So whether you bring the money and I bring my skill, we need to see that as equal and not power over me because my contribution seems to be less than yours. So true partnership for me is about valuing the contribution that we both bring to the table to contribute to create something beautiful. And we talk about co-creation, co-producing, collaboration, co-investing. And that is what partnership for me is about. It's not one-sided. So when government says we'd like to partner with you, my hand goes up saying, what do you mean? What does that mean? What do you want from me? Because if you're not clear about what you want, then I don't think this is a partnership. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Benny. That is such an interesting viewpoint. And I laughed when you said that you love elephants. My surname means elephant.
Oh, wow.
And there's always the saying that elephants don't forget. And when you were saying that, what came to mind is we almost need to create a memory within communities where doing things amongst communities is something that is done naturally and it comes as a default. And listening to you, the question that came up is to say the IUDF is actually trying to get civic society to engage. And one of the things you stated is that we really don't need policy as communities to be able to do stuff for ourselves and start being activated. And if this happens in pockets, maybe can you share with us your experience in terms of how did you get that right? How did you get an engaged neighborhood or an engaged, empowered civic? Because in my mind, if we understood the levers or the elements that go into having an engaged civic, perhaps we can then have a better chance of bringing actual policies like the IUDF to life, because what it does need is the pillar of the civic actually participating and being engaged in how we build these communities moving forward. What has been your experience or the things that you've triggered to engage civic in the way that you have?
I think one of the things that that is really, really important is, and like what we did in my own neighborhood, both my husband and I are very active. We've always been very active. And by being, so for instance, we grow our own food, we share it with the neighbors. And I think, you know, learning by doing and demonstrating and doing it, not just talking about it, but being able to actually show people that we care about our environment. In that way, we were able to kind of influence the neighbor who came and said, okay, so what are you and your husband doing? And we're like, we don't like grass verges that are growing like into the street. You know, it doesn't work like that. And we want to be proud of where we are. And they said, well, can we join you? We said, fine. And so on and so on. The one neighbor came, and I think it always needs to be activated by somebody. And somebody has to step up. So where the successes have been in the areas where we've worked, it has been exactly that. So we are tuned into finding gems in communities. I intentionally drive around looking for people who are doing things and stopping my car and saying, so why are you cleaning your yard? Why are you doing that? Why are you planting? and listening to stories, beautiful stories of them telling you why they do that and what their interests are and how they get others activated. So where we've seen success has been the drivers, people that are passionate about their communities, people are passionate about the environment, people are passionate about safety, and finding those gems and just naturally just being able to attract other people to them to be able to do that, which is incredible. And so it's very inspiring to see what is happening. And it's across communities. It's not just in the suburbs. It's across communities where we're seeing that, where people are actually stepping up and saying, we're not waiting for the councillor. We cannot wait. This condition that we're living in is unhygienic, it's unsafe, and we're going to come together. Ironically, it's always women. In our instance, we're working with 2 men, but 90% of the drivers of active citizenship have been women. Because we just get on with it. And I love my husband, and I've got 2 sons, love them dearly. So there's nothing about men, but it seems like women are just taking the baton and saying, look, this is not good for our families. This is not good for our community. And we're going to step up and we're going to do something. So there's something in the gendered way as well that you get active citizens engaging. And that's an interesting dimension, interesting for me. Not surprising, because all my life in this work, I predominantly worked with women, not just by default. It just kind of like, we get attracted to each other. I think it's the energy or something like that. Yeah. So very definitely. And so I worry about when we talk about scaling things up, because it is by doing these little things. And I always say one of my favorite slogans is, everything big was once small. So you didn't just grow big.
Yes.
You had to start somewhere. And so this is really what we're trying to do in the work that Ikala Trust is doing, is little, one community at a time, one little town at a time, and then learning from the experience, giving people funding to actually go to a community and say, go and learn from them. They will tell you, because they're the experts and not us. We just the catalyst, we just the gapper, and we just bringing things together. But that's an important, I feel really, really important, is the learning and sharing by communities to communities. Because that's the only way, you know, them telling their own story, not through some official, saying, look, go and learn what happened in Alexandria, Diepsloot, wherever you're located, here in PE, in Zwedi, KwaZulu, go and learn. How did those people do it? And it's often got to do with the personality. This has got nothing to do with policy. It's about who you're dealing with. And in my experience, it's mostly arrogance. It's mostly like, you paid to do your job, then damn well do it. That's what I say. In the not-for-profit sector, if I don't do my job, the funder doesn't fund us. As the director, that is my job. I've got to deliver on what we say. Otherwise, you don't get funded. And so, unfortunately, the consequences for others is not the same. You can just coast, you know, and it really angers me. I get so mad when I'm like, if I didn't do my report, I wouldn't get my funding. And here these guys are not fixing the damn holes and they get paid, you know. So, yeah. Anyway, let me stop there. I get incensed.
Yes, no, I hear what you're saying, and it's interesting that you bring up the gender element to it, because I think if our cities actually worked and our towns actually worked, it would also be enabling a whole lot of households, because there's a stats I came across recently in some of the work that I do, and it was saying that around 47% of our households in this country are actually women-led. And so if we had functional cities, it means that we are activating 47% of maybe interacting with those females. We would be able to activate the civic and have them be involved and have them effect change. And it's the same thing with education, and it's the same thing with employment, to say if you employ a female, chances are you're going to empower a whole host of people, because there's so many things that that female will do with whatever little money that they get in terms of nurturing their family and their extended family and everyone. And without turning it into a gender discussion, I think you raise a good point that perhaps policymakers and planners need to think around to say, how do we leverage off the natural strength of feminine energy or the female to get into the doing and get on with things like you have just said. And what I also got from you is that the mobilization is happening within communities. I want to understand, where does it fall apart in terms of now you are all encouraged, you're all mobilizing, and you've all tried and done things, and you've got a rhythm, a tempo going with the community. Where does it fall apart in terms of getting the support and getting the partnership that you would like to get from government? And maybe take us through, what type of partnership are you looking for when you are in these situations and you are starting up these projects? What do you hope to get from government, and what do you think the issue is from getting that? How come that doesn't play out the way you wish it would?
It's a very, very tricky question, but I'm going to try and answer it. So Ikala Trust also is what we call a community grant making organization. By that, we mean we're responsive. So for instance, just to give you a very simple example, I received a letter for support this morning when I arrived at my office, when I opened my laptop. By 10 o'clock, we had phoned the organization. By 1 o'clock, they more than likely will get the application, will be filled in. By tomorrow, they'll have their money. Because we are called, or what we'd like to call ourselves, we are a responsive investor. So where there's energy and people are doing something already, all we're doing is we're leveraging off that, and we know that the funding that we give is an incentive to do even better. So where it breaks down in communities is they've done something, they've done a hell of a lot of work, and maybe all they want is somebody to help them to, let's use the analogy of the water tank and the hose pipe. All they need is for somebody to link and to connect that. But that's going to take 6 months, because you've got to go through a whole process through the supply chain and this, and you've got to be CSD and you've got to be registered. I mean, we've tried for 2 years, we're still not registered because some fool uploaded us incorrectly at SARS, which means that we can't work and we can't do any work with them. But then I wonder about how all these other guys have got it right, with the PPE and all of this kind of thing. That's another point for another day. But that's where communities get demotivated, where they've done the hard slog and then they've got to wait. And it's always excuses. And if we could just understand that when you're capturing a community with that energy, you've got to actually just celebrate it. Just little things, just, open doors, connect them to people, do something. And we try and do that, but we're a real micro organization in the bigger C. We have some seriously good connections, and we try. I'm working with a couple of people within the municipality that are breaking the rule a little bit, bending the rules, not breaking it, because they are so excited by some of the things they're seeing that is emerging in communities. So for me, it's about when it gets to the bureaucratic process, is there any other way? I know that there's small grants like grants in aid and so on, but is there any way that one can deviate a little bit from this bureaucratic tough system where a group of gogos who never went to school, but they're doing great stuff in their community, why should we put them through all these hoops to enable them, if all they want is a bin or a couple of bins or the road to be fixed because they've already done it so far, So there's a couple of those examples where people are just frustrated and they give up. They're like, nobody listens, nobody's listening to us because we perceive as empty. And as soon as we understand that the organization or the people that we work with are human beings with gifts and talents and skills and communities as assets and not as liabilities and not as an inconvenience. We're there to serve, and we need to bring that culture of serving back into the workplace, back into our DNA. It's not difficult, but again, it goes back to we need that paradigm shift. We need to see the glass half full. We need to see communities as co-investors and not just as passive recipients of what we think they deserve. And it's to go to people and ask. That's the way we work. When people want funding from us, they tell us what they want. And we'll say, okay, if that's what you want, then that's what we'll support. Because we're responsive. Because if you are doing that, it will sustain itself. You're not coming in and changing other people's narrative. It's their narrative, it's not mine. I don't live there, so I think it's much more respectful listening and hearing the voice of people. And I think we'll go a long way to fixing some of the mess that I talked about earlier. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Benny. And what you're saying is that there is a lot happening on the ground, and that's really, I suppose, something we need to celebrate. And that takes us to, I think, our next slot, because one of the things we thought would be important to do today as we're talking about the partnership of communities and government was to really share and display stories where communities and ordinary citizens, like you're saying, are doing things in their communities. And I think that becomes what's important, is maybe for government to realize that it's not like communities are just sitting there. There's just that need for us to bridge the gap where I think the co-creation has not become a fiber in our communities, and we're not co-investing, co-creating, and co-thinking about things. And if really the IUDF as a policy is to succeed, one of the things we would really need to be able to do is to do exactly that, to co-create the communities that we want to live in. So with that, Benny, and you will join me along with two other panelists that are speakers as well today. I would like to ask Sean to share a number of stories that we thought were very simple, interesting, inspiring stories of ordinary community to share with everyone. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rihanna Edwards, and I'm the CEO of Harlem Consult, a fashion consultancy. I'm also the founding member of Sorry for Change, a fashion project. At Sorry for Change, we upcycle saris, recreating new garments, whilst we teach women skills in both business as well as garment making. The women eventually become our suppliers. Our training takes place in townships and safe spaces such as schools.
Hi, my name is Tabiso Piri. I grew up in Soweto, Muletsani, and growing up in Muletsani, which is one of the lesser known locations in Soweto, and probably one of the more rougher ones. You grow up with seeing a lot of people struggling and but happy, but not living their best lives, as you say. It made me see what I didn't want to be, and made me see where I'd want to see my life go.
My name is Lerato Maroli. I grew up in Soweto, Orlando West. I then moved to the south in the late 90s. I grew up with my grandmother and grandfather. My struggle started early in my childhood age, where I started having an interest in community development. That led to me moving and in the formulation of the SPCDF in trying to liberate the needy around the south, the deep south of Soweto. That project started in 2007, which moved as far as national through the informal settlement network.
My name is Tilani Piri and I was born in Soweto, Orlando East. I went to the Tawana Primary and later to Koboshiani in Diepkloof, where I completed my higher primary. It was actually when I was completing my last year at Koboshiani when I was offered a bursary to complete my high school career at Rauco, which was a college for our university at that time, and it was based in Brixton. It was this opportunity that opened up my world to the different cultures and the opportunities that lay out there for me. It really shaped the person that I am today.
Hi, igama lami uSanele Wangayana. I grew up in a place called Wamashu, or rather known as Esinqanqaweni, in eThekwini municipality. A small location where people moved from Cato Manor mostly in the 1950s to come here. And how it shaped me to live in Indawo to Wamashu is that you see a lot of poverty in Mosakula. You go around about who are struggling and it becomes your norm. But I was lucky enough, as much as there were a lot of leaders who shaped us and grew us to say, there is more than just what you see here. And so I became Namusane, who said, I need to get out of here and do more, but not get out of here and do more and then never come back, but then come back and then change Lendaole Marion.
My name is Mildred Mashal. I grew up in Alexander. I'm a teacher. Alexander really shaped who I am today. As seeing the things that were happening in society, I was determined to become an agent of change. I'm part of an initiative called Philippine Sisterhood Group Club Girls. It's all about mentorship and, more importantly, sisterhood.
I run a training academy called Titan Bikes Riding Academy, where I train little kids from the age of 4 years old to ride and hopefully race little pocket bikes like the one behind me. I've been doing this now for about 5 years, and we've produced quite close to 100 kids capable of riding pocket bikes, and about 10% of those have gone on to race and have won their own races and so forth. I used to train kids from outside FNB Stadium, and well, unfortunately with 2020 with COVID, we're supposed to be training from the Rock Raceway.
Together with my high school mates from Rauco, we founded Teresano Foundation 8 years ago. And this is a self-funded initiative that provides soft skills and career guidance to high school learners. We deliver the classes on Saturdays through our volunteers of young professionals. We provide also an annual career day where we expose the learners to so many more opportunities that are out there that they can explore in their different careers that they choose.
My project initiative is Little Farmers. We are trying to teach all grade 4 in primary schools as Exas NPO how to do poultry farming and how to have a small scale egg production. So not just any chickens, it's egg producing chickens for 2 reasons. The first one is that it's important to interact in. Number 2, we have seen in South Africa, we've got a huge problem where when you look at people who enter the system in grade 1 and people who complete in matric, about 30% of them complete, which means that 70% gets lost in the system. So what we want to do is to help that 70% to have something to do should they get lost on their way. And if you can be able to sustain yourself after school, then we would have done one hell of a job.
Recently, we've been awarded a prize by Goldman Sachs and Fortune in recognizing this pay-it-forward model. The prize money will be used to recreate new incubation hubs in the townships at schools. This will contribute towards unemployment in our country. This paying forward model tracks it from a woman donating a gently worn sari to us upskilling these women to then eventually becoming our supplier. Our products are being exported to countries such as Denmark, Sweden, and the USA.
Tirisano Foundation is kept going through the support of the likes of Mambusi, who prepares the meals for our learners on Saturdays, the facilitating volunteers who deliver the classes on these Saturdays, the general public and corporate SA that donate during the fundraiser events that we participate in, and the monthly contributions by the members.
Our most achievements that we've acquired is through the Big Sisters, who are in the hierarchy of the Sisterhood Club. These are ladies that already established themselves professionally, so they assist us into mentoring, exposing us to different life opportunities.
Our greatest support to achieving this project has definitely been South African Cities Networks. We really wouldn't be able to have started without them. With the funding that we got, we've been able to get chickens, we've been able to get cages, we've even been able to provide children with notes on how to go about poultry farming.
The greatest support I've received has got to be from my family, my wife, with her understanding what it is and my passion with training kids to ride motorbikes, and my two sons that love racing motorbikes and have gone on to do so well within the sport.
Our greatest obstacle, as we all know, COVID-19. Of course, schools aren't working as they usually do, which means we've had to do these classes during the weekends, which has been quite an adjustment to get around. Another obstacle has been all the unintended costs that also come, because with COVID-19, everything got inflated versus what it was 3 months ago. But we've been able to come around it thanks to SACN. And of course, interacting with student governing bodies is always going to be a challenge in some areas, because our communities are used to getting food or stationery, but not something that's more long-term. So to get people to understand that has been a difficulty, but we've finally come to a sweet spot where we're all working together and all the stakeholders are happy, and finally the children are learning.
My biggest obstacles have got to be, unfortunately, it's considered an elite sport, so there isn't any government support or any sort of financial support from any sort of institutions out there. So unfortunately, we have to do it on our own.
Our biggest challenge was the pandemic, COVID-19, as we are unable to hold our monthly meetings, and this affected us with the mentorship programs and how we were guided with the Big Sisters and everything. But through the easing of time, we were able to be better with it. Thank you.
Unfortunately, with the COVID pandemic and the fourth industrial revolution upon us, they need to go digital so that we reach as many learners and make a difference in as many lives as we can. That need has never been greater than it is now. And unfortunately, financial assistance remains our biggest obstacle.
Challenges would be support from officials, municipalities. At most, you would realize that most officials would not understand specifically some of the challenges that are faced with, how things need to be done, in a sense that people believe that they need to be doing things for those that are needy, instead of people that are needy assisting on the processes. So we have had so many challenges around that. E.g. would be Slovo Park and its history, in saying documents that we have written are elaborate further as per the challenges and successes that we had. That even led us to go into court in trying to address some of the challenges that we are faced with. It hasn't been a smooth journey, but we still believe on the cause.
Thank you so much for all the participants that are here today that have sat through listening to those beautiful stories. And when I listened to them, I was incredibly inspired at the difference in scope and the vast wideness of what people are involved in that inspires them, that they want to share with their communities and their world, had been for me one of the most inspiring things. And what's also interesting to observe out of all of these stories is that despite the challenges, everybody is saying we're still carrying on, we're making it work, we're pushing. And it was also interesting for me to observe that not everybody is saying government should be helping us. They are worried about COVID and what that's doing to their momentum and what they need to do. And for me, that talks to the readiness of civic society. And it talks to how do we then tap into that, and how does government tap into that? And the center or the heart of the IUDF as a policy is to be able to do exactly that. And listening to Benny earlier when she was saying, but we've been talking about this for years and nothing has shifted. The question becomes, can the IUDF, if properly implemented, can it really respond to that need to merge and bring together an all of society environment where we can all then start co-creating the futures that we envision? And with the stories that we've just had now, I would like to move into a discussion with Ronald Eglin. Ronald Eglin is our second speaker today. And Ronald is a sustainable settlement specialist at Aphesis Copland. And before joining the organization, he actually studied city and regional planning at the University of Cape Town. Here, I'm also from Cape Town. Ronald, I studied at the University of Cape Town. And he joined the organization in the early 90s. And his present work predominantly focuses on land access and sustainable settlement work. Ronald has a keen interest in development planning, community development, environmentally sustainable development, and participatory planning. And some of his more recent interests include the people's housing process, cooperative housing, incremental settlement development, and land access, as well as urban and rural and tenure and land use management. And I'd like to bring his view and his story, looking at the discussions that we've had earlier with Benny, where Benny's focus really is to mobilize communities and get them involved in different activities and just make sure that they themselves become their own assets. And we have Benny bringing in the lens of sustainable settlement development. And with that specialization, I would also like to get a sense from you, Benny, to say, what has been your experiences and where does it fall apart? Where does the partnership fall apart? And if it were working properly, what would you like to have seen happening? Thank you, Benny. Thank you, Ronald.
Yes, thank you very much. Ronald Eglin from Aphesis Copland, an NGO based in East London, supporting communities to engage government. We support communities to help communities and active citizens within communities to address the needs of communities. I have actually been exposed to the asset-based community development approach that Bernie presented earlier. And over the years, we have tried to incorporate some of that thinking into the way we engage with communities and work with communities. Just in what I said earlier, we support communities to help them to address their needs, to help them engage government to address their needs. That in itself shows that we haven't totally internalized this concept of asset-based community development, because it should be about supporting communities not just to address their needs, but to build on their assets. And we are aware of that and do try and bring that perspective to our work, but we often forget about it, or we fall back into the old ways of thinking. I'm going to talk about two experiences that we have as an NGO working with communities. The first is our experience with upgrading of informal settlements, and the second is some experience with service delivery monitoring within some communities. In about 2014, 2015, our NGO were part of a consortium of NGOs or of consultants that was appointed through the National Upgrading Support Program to assist the Buffalo City Metropolitan Municipality to develop upgrading plans for 32 informal settlements in Buffalo City. The brief was that we needed to do this using community participatory techniques. And we committed through that participatory planning process to use the asset-based community development approach, which involved, because we were working with 32 informal settlements over a relatively short period of time, we weren't able to go in detail with each informal settlement. So we clustered them into about 7 to 9 clusters, and undertook 3 sets of workshops. The first was a workshop with these clusters of informal settlements to unpack what the assets were and what the challenges were in each informal settlement. The second workshop was then to work with those community structures from the informal settlements to develop draft upgrading plans, specifically focusing what are the first things that need to be done, what are the initial basic interventions like providing more communal toilets, addressing storm water and things like that, with the intention that that becomes the first step in the upgrading process. And then the third set of workshops was then presenting draft plans based on the discussions we had had in that first set of workshops, or rather that second set of workshops, that were presented back to the community and to get feedback on whether the plans that were being proposed were what communities were expecting. So the thing about the upgrading of informal settlements and how we interpreted it is that it is an approach of incrementally, step by step, building on what people have already done for themselves. People have already occupied land. They already have built structures. They already have community leadership institutions around. They already have social networks that have been built. They already have relationships with neighbors, with local schools, etc. So the idea of upgrading of informal settlement is to build on those initiatives and those activities that have already taken place within that informal settlement. So I think the asset-based community development approach does lend itself to that. The upgrading of informal settlements approach is a government program, and it does follow this phased approach of starting with what you've got on the ground and trying to build on that in a phased manner, working with the community, government, municipalities and government working together to address their housing and settlement development needs. I think what came out of it was that we did help the community to develop some basic upgrading plans for these 32 informal settlements, which were actually approved by council, by the Buffalo City Metro. In the planning process, we also did work with officials from the planning department and the human settlements department within the municipality. So they were exposed to this participatory way of planning and working with communities. It all sounds good up to now, but unfortunately, after the plans were approved by the council, since then, November 2015, when the plans were approved, these plans have not been implemented to date. Sorry about that. The main reason for, I think one of the reasons for these plans not being introduced or implemented is that within the municipality and within government, there wasn't a clear understanding of what upgrading of informal settlements is actually all about. And there wasn't, and there hasn't been an appreciation of this mindset shift that is needed within government to move from a situation where those that deal with housing and service delivery see it as, we as government will come and build the houses for you, we'll put in the services for you, etc. And not appreciating the fact that the upgrading of informal settlements is more about working with communities and working step by step to try and address those needs. For example, one of the reasons given why they haven't been able to put in basic services and things like additional communal toilets and things like that in informal settlements, so that the municipality claim that there's no formal layout plan that has been produced for that settlement, and they can't therefore invest in these types of investments of new water taps, new toilets until there is a formal layout plan. But actually that's not how the upgrading of informal settlements designed. It's designed that you can move into an informal settlement and provide the initial emergency services, interim services, and even on land that the municipality or government owns. The upgrading of informal settlements makes it possible to put in services onto land not owned by government. Those services are a basic right that people need no matter where they live. And so as the upgrading informal settlement program is designed to provide that right. But as I said, it's not been implemented as it should be, because the municipality has not really understood this mind shift that's needed. We have been, as NGOs involved in this consortium supporting this community, our work came to an end a few years ago, but in the last year or two, we have, as an NGO, been approached by these communities again, some of them who've asked us to help them get these upgrading plans implemented. So we are now in a process of trying to engage the municipality, working with the community leadership structures to put pressure on the municipality to actually implement these upgrading plans. And one of the ideas, and there has been interest shown by the certain officials within the municipality, not all officials, but some officials have shown an interest to work with us and some of these informal settlements to undertake pilot projects to demonstrate how you can do these initial interventions in informal settlements to help them get basic services. Some of the officials within the Buffalo City municipality visited City of Cape Town before COVID lockdown, and they saw the reblocking approach that was being undertaken by some of the communities there and by the City of Cape Town. So the electricity department within Buffalo City, there are some people there that are very keen to pilot the reblocking of some informal settlements here in Buffalo City to demonstrate how you could do that to provide electricity to shacks and informal settlements. Reblocking is basically where you shift the shacks around and move them a little bit so that you can bring roads and services into these informal settlements. It's needed in many settlements, but particularly the higher density settlements where the shacks are all close together. So we are quite excited, or we optimistic that we are going to be able to make progress through this pilot project approach to demonstrate that communities and municipality can work together to upgrade informal settlements. The second initiative that I'd like to briefly talk about is something called...
Ronald?
Hello?
Before we get to the second initiative, what I would like to do, looking at the time we have, is to bring in Karen's voice and understand her perspective and her experience, so that we can then bring back Benny as well and go through the conversations and look at some of the questions that have already come through from the audience. And to the audience that are listening and are still with us, thank you for being with us. And please, if you have any questions, just post them on the Q&A and on the chat. We will be able to pick them up. And Ronald, I will bring you in with the second initiative, but let me introduce Karen. And Karen has a Bachelor of Arts in Social Work from the University of Wits. She has more than 30 years of social work experience as well, both in private practice and in the NGO sector. And she has been the operations manager at the service dining rooms since 2017. And throughout her career, really, Karen has felt that she needs to focus on being of service to the homeless and to the community. And to just add on to the two voices of community champions, really, that we've had, Karen from Benny and from Ronald, and the different stories that were shared with us through the video. Please, can you come in and just reflecting on what the two speakers have already shared, can you come in with your perspective and your experience in terms of what's happening on the ground, and where does the partnership with government fall flat, and why is that not synchronizing and working properly like a well-oiled machine? And what are your thoughts around that, Karen?
Thank you for letting me come on. While Bernie was talking, I was suddenly started thinking of other things. I was concentrating on the government and the COVID pandemic. And as Bernie was talking, I thought of quite a few other things that we've tried to sort out with the government before COVID, and we just haven't managed. And the one thing is, in the 2018, in February, all the tap heads were removed from the CBD in Cape Town. I'm in Cape Town, due to the drought. And you know that those tap heads have still not been returned, even though we've asked and asked. So the homeless, I deal with the homeless community in Cape Town. There's no water available for the homeless community unless the service dining rooms, when I work, we put out huge 25-litre containers every day from the time we arrive at 7 until the time we go. But otherwise, other than that, there's no drinking water for the homeless. It's the same for the toilets. There are no toilets for the homeless or even the security guards and public safety people. But coming to just two examples of what happened during the COVID. In July, we were offered 50,000 Rand from the mayor. It was to go into food parcels, to prepare food parcels to give to families. So we spent a lot of time deciding what should go into a food parcel, carbohydrates, proteins, things like that. And we also found that we would be able to feed 143 families, a family of 6, for a week. And we had got everything ready, and we had a supplier who would actually prepare and do the food parcels for us. And the mayor's section, or whatever they call it, office came back and said that they would choose the families, they would choose what went into the food parcels, and they would choose how long it would feed a family.
And so eventually the board of service deliveries decided to actually send the money back, because we'd also been given money from a grant and aid, and this was sort of taking up so much time, the food parcel issue, that we couldn't concentrate on the grant and aid money. So we actually sent the 50,000 Rand back to the mayor's office and started concentrating on the grant and aid. The grant and aid, we were given that. We weren't allowed to read or sign the MOA beforehand to read it. We were called in, we had to sign it there and then, and it's quite prescriptive. So those are our two experiences so far during the COVID with the City of Cape Town.
Okay, Karen. So can you still hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I think what I'm hearing is just maybe the co-creation, if you look at what Ronald presented as well, the understanding of what needs to happen from the community side of things and the officials, there is that breakdown in communication in terms of what is required by the communities and what the officials thinks or they think should happen. Would you say that's one of the things that's happening? There's a question that came in as well from one of the participants, and they were asking, could the issue be that many of us as communities just don't understand the structures of local government and how to access the assistance we need or the relevant people, or even provincial government that connect us between local and provincial government? And do people have professionals who need to be, it says the people have professionals who need to be activated to participate in civic work. And when I was listening to you, I wondered if there's also a process issue that if we were to implement something like the IUDF, where we have to make sure that it's an all of society participation, that what's coming across is also the disjoint in terms of how government is working at the moment, which probably needs to change, and how civic society then approaches those processes. Have you felt like that's partly what's happening? And I'm happy, looking at the time, to bring back in Benny and Ronald to maybe address this question as we continue the conversation. Did you ever feel that that's probably part of the breakdown between community and government partnership?
Well, for me, no, because I have been in the field for like a very, very long time, and I know exactly who to contact, and it makes no difference. So for me, no. We're just managing to do things on our own. It's easier that way.
What makes it easier? Is it the bureaucracy that you sort of don't
Yeah,
want?
you know, we have a
to
problem with the
engage
homeless getting drenched in winter with the winter rains here. And we were told that if we contacted a ward councillor, he would get army tarpaulins and gazebos to put up. Never happened. So we just now have made our own little plans so that they don't get drenched and sopping wet and sick.
So there's also where you've just stopped relying on government's assistance and just carried on with what you need to carry on. And maybe Ronald, you can come in on this one and give your perspective. With your particular instance, did you feel that processes and understanding of those was part of the problem? Just looking at the question that came through from one of the audiences.
Yes, I think that in many communities there is a lack of understanding of how municipal processes work. Housing and settlement development does get complicated with different spheres of government having different responsibility, etc. And so building an understanding of within communities of what their rights are. They have a right to water, they have a right to healthy environment, etc. That is a good starting point to get people to realize that They don't have to just sit back and wait for government to do things. They have a right to engage government around things which are in the Constitution. Once they have that understanding, the next step becomes building their capacity to understand where they can go to within government, which department is appropriate department to approach for different things. So there is a role for civil NGOs and intermediaries to play in building the capacity and the agency of community-based organizations to know how they can interface and engage with government.
And one of the questions, and maybe Benny, you can pick it up. Thank you so much, Ronald, for that insight. I think as the policy engagements of the IUDF are carrying on, these are some of the elements that government would have to look at to say, how do we activate an empowered community? And education and awareness is one of the elements that we'll definitely have to look at. There's a question around, what do the ward councillors do for the wards? And we need to hold them accountable. How do we hold them accountable? And maybe Benny, since you've been sitting out for a while, in your engagements and in your projects, how has the relationship with ward councillors been like, and what do you expect them to do, and why have they not gotten to doing that?
So I'm sorry to be pessimistic, but generally it's really poor and really bad. And if the councillor can't benefit from whatever you're doing, then I'm sorry, ain't gonna happen. So I'm sorry that I sound, but that is the reality. And so for you and I, at least we have access. I've got a phone, I've got an office, I've got a car, I've got connections, and I can go to people, I can phone people. But for some person sitting in an informal settlement or whatever, no access to data, transport, or how do you engage? And everything that we've got in legislation is written in English. And yet that's not the mother tongue of most people. And I don't think anybody's really bothered to try. Even when I go to council meetings, they're done in English and the audience is all of a different language. So there are many, many barriers. And I think one of the things that the IUDF should be thinking about is, how do you make information, how do you create or develop material and information that can be understood at all levels, whether you're literate, whether you're illiterate, whether you're educated, or how do you make information accessible so that everybody, because there isn't a lack of information, it's accessibility to information. I fortunately have friends in the local municipality, so they kind of keep me informed about legislation and policy changes. But even this guy, and he's very senior, says it's a whole lot of hogwash because they don't consult anybody, and it's policy, and that's all it is. It's the implementation. I think South Africa is great. Like our constitution, we have no lack of policy formulators in this country at all. They're brilliant on paper. It's the actual enactment and the living out of that policy. And we'll spend another decade talking about that. So I think that there are several bottlenecks, and I think we need to find ways where we can engage, around maybe a common theme. I don't know what that's going to be, but I mean, I'm just very happy that I sit where I sit. If I was living in the township and looking what they look like today, I can't even get my van into some of those roads. It's disgusting. My colleagues have to get into those. I mean, when they get to work, their shoes are all messed up. People are stressed, because why is it okay for the materially poor to live in such squalor and these terrible conditions? So there's no, again, going back to shifting of mindset and this arrogance and blaming, if only they'd understand that government is just, there's people with a heart and a head there. They're not just government. They are human beings working. So that's where the bottlenecks are. It's not, you can't just say, well, government, because not everybody there is bad. But unfortunately, as I say, there isn't a sense of service, which really is heartbreaking. No service to your own. And we need to ensure that through the integrated urban development framework, that those softer, bring our humanity back, those softer issues, make us care more. You know, the policies are great, but that doesn't teach you to care. You know, so yeah.
It really doesn't, because I think you're right, Benny. Looking at Karen's story, where her experience has been to contact the ward councillor, and they still haven't gotten the help. It just shows that there is really that gap, maybe from also a softer side of humanity perspective. I'm looking at the time, and I would like to bring Karen back in the room and ask one last question. And if you guys could just maybe keep it brief, but try and shed light to what we're hoping to get, which is to say, if the partnership with government, in just a sentence, if the partnership with government were to work according to you, what do you think? And this is to your story and your projects. What's the one thing you would like government to do? And Karen, you can go first.
I think that they should know that we are the experts and they should listen to us. They cannot keep on being prescriptive and telling us how to do our work. That's it.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you for that. And Ronald?
I think that a good starting point would be for governments to make space and undertake pilot projects, because I was talking about the upgrading of informal settlements and shifting the mindset from government will build houses for people to communities and government will work together and incrementally improve living conditions of people, building on what people are already doing. So that's a big mindset shift. And I think it's only through pilot projects that we can make space for municipal officials and government to do things that are different. They're so used to doing things the one way, the RDP housing way, that many of them are very scared to try something new. And pilot projects opens up that space to experiment and do things new. The new being this partnership approach and co-planning, co-implementing, co-monitoring, etc., with communities in the upgrading process.
Thank you for that, Ronald. Benny, one sentence.
One sentence. Listen to the aspirations of community.
That's beautiful. We have Benny who asked a very technical question on the chat around COCTA, and I believe Stephanie is handling that question. And also we have a comment from Brendan, and Brendan says that this session highlights the tension within real life functional partnerships and the energy and passion of the NGO sector and the bureaucratic processes. He feels that you can feel the tension between those two elements, and also that it highlights the urgent need to professionalize the local government sector. And I think that's an incredible insight coming through from Brandon there, who's commenting on the chat. I think one of the things that has been quite exciting and inspirational for me throughout the whole Urban Festival and these My IUDF sessions has been having artistic influence in these discussions where they say that pictures say a million words, right? So throughout the process, we've had artists who capture the conversation and capture the discussion that's going on. And we fortunately still have Ndia with us, who has been listening to this conversation and turning it into art. And if you go to the website, the Urban Festival website, you actually can see some of the drawings that she's been able to come up with. And I mean, they just tell stories of their own and they come to life on their own. And it's been such a wonderful thing to experience. And I would really like to bring her to the stage now or to the room and ask that she takes us through what her interpretation of today's conversation is. And we can get a sense and visual stimulation from her work. Dia, please, may you join the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for today. It was very inspiring to hear all the people doing amazing work for the communities. And I'm really sending you all a lot of strength to, you know, carry on with what you're doing. It means a lot. The little bit of effort means a lot. I'm going to switch my camera to show you what happened in the session. And we looked at you know, individuals and their stories, you know, the relationship between cities and our people that feeds the cities and actually help the city to grow. And all the stories and the segregation that we actually experience, we have experienced through apartheid, and how we can, you know, as an urban structure, how it actually is so detrimental to growth as a country. And then also people and their suitcases and their stories and the meaning of what all of this different symbols that surrounds it mean. And also us as a community, how we can preserve the fire and the power of our country. So today, the very important message was basically how individuals can contribute to a bigger picture, you know, to grow something bigger. So if you get little speckles of light that feeds this big sun, and we can keep it burning and we can grow it into a healthy sun. And the ripple effect that each, and I've represented each active individual in terms of a house with light, you know, a building with light. If this is a government building, and the kind of ripple effect that it has in its surrounding, and could it heal an entire community? And when it heals an entire community, can the government recognize that how much our people is an asset, how important the people are, and how it can actually help the country grow further, you know? And in terms of assets, looking at assets, you know, like the skill labor, farming, food, culture, education, safety, you know, green spaces, art itself, and looking at where does all this power comes from? They come from, you know, the villages, the townships, the suburbs that actually feeds the city. Because itself, the city would be quite a dead organism, you know? And we always speak about the city, the government. I always think that the government feels like a robot to me. What is the government, you know? Who is the government? And do they actually have, are they individual, you know, kind of robots? Are they robots? Are they individual robots? Can the robots have hearts? If they do have hearts, do they start smiling? Do they actually help us make things, you know, provide services, provide water, provide safety, provide internet, provide electricity? And how much of it are we wasting? How much of it is going to waste, and how much is actually flying away and going to the people that actually needs it? So looking at, you know, if it really would work, and if we had a dead township where nothing is working, no electricity, no health, and where everything is out of order, but what if we start getting this gear moving? Because at the end of the day, maybe maybe they are individuals with hearts, maybe for it. Maybe they can press the buttons and maybe the stuff can flow and maybe we can have a colorful, beautiful, home to be in, neighborhood to be beautiful and healthy. And looking at the basic services, like something like internet, and making sure that internet is available within the city, within suburbs, within rural areas. So especially now that our kids are actually studying at home and they can actually study and have education and help everyone progress. And in return, feed this whole organism, which is the government, the city, and make things work. So this is my interpretation of today. And I hope that it was inspiring to you all. I was very inspired with everyone's conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ndia, for sharing your gift with us. Each week, you've just blown my mind away at how you interpret all of this and bring it to life visually. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the gift that you have. It's a beautiful gift. Thank you. And to everyone who has been with us today and everybody who has stayed until the end, we are just a few minutes over. And with that, I would really like to echo something that Ndia said, which is also what Benny said, to say that ultimately the government we aspire to partner with is people within that system. And I am inspired by the videos that were played today, where despite the challenges, there is the fire to carry on, to be engaged and to participate and to continue carrying the attitude of service and of improving the different spaces that we are in. Our hope as the people that are engaging with policy is just to find an instrument, a way of really bringing this conversation between government and civic society to come to life and to move into a space where, like Ronald mentioned, where we are co-creating, we are co-planning, we are engaging, and we are putting up pilots and experimenting and really moving to the space where we are responding to the needs of society and not as government just coming up with our own ideas, and to believe and have trust that the people on the ground know what they need and what they want and be able to respond to that. And I hope that today's conversation gives that insight and it moves the dial a bit forward in terms of government getting the feedback and the understanding that really the engagement of civic society can only happen where government comes with heart and there's authentic, genuine intention to really partner together and do this together. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much for making the time to be here. And we appreciate all the panelists that have given their time to be here. Karen, Benny, Ronald, Ndia for the artwork, and the support team behind today's webinar from the South African Cities Network. Thank you so much for making today possible and for this conversation to happen. And we hope to continue moving forward to push the dial, and hopefully it does not take us another 10 years, Benny, but soon we will have an actual implementation plan that focuses us on doing what our societies and communities need. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.